All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the inaugural podcast of Real Estate Coast to Coast, or is it the Coast to Coast Real Estate Podcast?
And
Coast
we
to
haven't
Coast.
decided yet. We'll figure
We
it
haven't
out.
decided yet. We'll figure that out. I'm Milton Andrade. I run a team here out of Miami, Florida, a YouTube channel, Milton's Market Minute. And I've been in real estate my entire life, physically and in profession. So that's me in a nutshell. Steven, tell me
My
about
name
you.
is Stephen Meade. I run a boutique real estate firm in Long Beach, California, on the other side of the country. I have also kind of been in real estate my whole life. My uncle is a developer in Lake Tahoe, and my mother has been in commercial banking since I was a kid. So kind of born into this stuff and can't get away.
Awesome. Well, yeah, my parents were in real estate as well, so we had a lot in common because we managed our own brokerage and we were basically raised in real estate. So for anybody out there that has questions, we got answers. And we wanted to start this podcast because I wanted to be able to have a discussion with somebody of like mind that has been through the ups and the downs and the difference and the changes throughout the real estate market, throughout the banking cycle, throughout time on this earth. And nobody better than you to do it with. So here we are.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, likewise, just for everybody watching there. Both of us are kind of obsessive deep thinkers about stuff, and I say that because I think honestly that real estate is missing a little bit of that. I think there's a lot of people that are great at sales in real estate, and they're not always so great at really understanding what's going on. And I've always thought, like, whenever I bought a house myself, I wanted to collect as much information and insight and wisdom as possible, because this is probably the biggest decision, financially speaking, that someone is going to make, whether when they're buying or selling either their primary residence or an investment property. And it's just the numbers are just big for the average person. Nobody is dealing with things, or most of my clients are not dealing with anything as big as their real estate.
No, same here. Buying a home is typically a large investment most people make in their life. And when I have somebody come to me and they go, "Well, my sister's brother's cousin's roommate is a realtor, and so I think I have to use them." I always say, think about that a little bit more. This is the largest investment that you're going to make. Let's not screw this up by doing it with somebody that doesn't have your best interest at heart, is not necessarily a professional, or it's their first deal. Like, let me put my 20 years of experience behind your largest purchase, to make sure that it's the right deal, the right for the seller or the buyer. And I just think that the age of doing people a favor to be your realtor is over. It's important. Who you work with matters. You need to have somebody who's the knowledge broker that's been around the block and that can look forward and see what's ahead and get you the best transaction. So I 100% agree.
I mean, I'm going to say something that's maybe slightly controversial, and I kind of want to own this as an industry because I think it's important that we do. I don't think we, and I mean the collective, right? The royal we here in real estate have done a great job of acting like the professionals that most of us are, and frankly, all of us need to be. Somebody said, "Hey, gosh, with some of the changes coming, you're gonna have to say how much you charge and how much you make and all this stuff." I'm like, what other business does that? And I was like, another business does that? Lawyers do that, right? And I feel like if we want to be treated like professionals, if we want people to respect us as professionals, we actually have to be professionals. And this isn't a comment directed towards you, Milton. I've known you for a few years. I know you are always a professional. I'm a professional, but let's be honest. In the last 12 months, have you interacted with anyone that maybe wasn't quite as much of a professional as you would have hoped they would have been? And I
Yeah.
don't know about you, but this has happened a couple of times. I actually feel bad for their clients. I was like, I feel terrible for these people. I'm like, you're not getting what you deserve, and
Right.
frankly, what you're owed. And I'm kind of excited because I think we are entering a little bit of a new era in real estate. And I think that really consumers are going to get a lot more professionalism, and real estate agents are going to act more like professionals and be the professionals that the world needs. I mean, what's your median price in Miami for a single family home in your area?
So according to the books, it's like 500 and change, but really everything down here is about $1 million. The
Okay.
$500,000 is the starting budget for a single family home in most places.
All right. It's about the same here, right? Like I have people who complain that they don't have any representation when they buy a $60,000 car. They don't like that the
Right.
salesperson works for the dealership, let alone buying something that costs like $1 million. And so, you know, I think consumers really need someone to help be that person. Maybe not every consumer needs that, or that's not what everybody needs, but frankly, that's the way I've always thought about doing this business. That's how I've always approached it is I am
Yeah,
here to help you make the best decisions possible and then help you execute those decisions and bring the outcome that you want. I mean, it's like two parts. Give you lots of information so you can make a good decision. Then once we decide what we're doing, now I'm going to do everything I can to assist you on that journey and make that happen.
exactly. And that brings me to my our next topic is really, you know, why is the market the way it is today? Right? Because I think that a lot of people, when
Well,
they're
Milton,
thinking,
this is only a 30-minute podcast, so I don't know if we
well,
have time.
ultimately it's because you have to look at the trends over the last, not the 5 years, not 10 years, it's 20 and 30 years, right? It's the 30-year mortgages. And so I know you have an economics background, but I look at the big picture, I look at the trends, so you need to have an agent that's a professional that is going to be studying all these things. And somebody asks me, is this a good deal? I can tell you that based on the facts of what's sold, not just in the last 6 months or in the year, or where the trajectory of where prices are going, where the inventory levels are, it's whether it's a good deal or not, right?
Well, I mean,
Uh,
you know, I'll answer your question like, how do I think we got to where we are? By the way, where are we? Accelerating prices and very limited inventory and difficult opportunities for entry level buyers. I mean, that's kind of like where we are. Like, how did the market get here? How did we get here, right? And the fact is, as you mentioned, this is the result of not like 1 or 2 years. Everybody's like, well, before the pandemic. No, the seeds of this market were planted long ago and have been watered
yeah,
for for decades. I mean, I'm in California. And I think this might even be an issue in your market too. We build maybe a quarter of the new homes every year that we need to build just to stay at the
yeah,
current, like just to keep up with what's going on, right?
right,
So we have perennial shortages in this market. And you ask, well, why is that? Well, number one, it's very expensive to build houses. A lot of the code requirements, a lot of things, have changed and made it more expensive to build homes. And then let's also factor in just the land cost, right? Like, and
yeah,
you know this in your market. Sure, in the middle of
scarcity.
Florida, land costs are cheap. Anywhere near the beach in Miami where people want to be, land costs are expensive. This is why they build
Yeah,
high rises to
right.
maximize the people on the land. And so,
And we don't physically even have buildable land. What you see is what you get. The rest is swamp. People think of Miami as like the beaches, but South Florida is mostly swamp and Everglade. So you don't have as much buildable land. We're this tiny little sliver
see, I
just
didn't
on the,
know that.
everybody, yeah, everybody wants to move here, but you dig 2 feet underground, and a lot of places you hit water. And so, we are where everything is kind of built on stilts. They are pilings in the ground because this is sand. So it's scarcity of land and cost of construction. But like if you look at our coastline, there is no waterfront lots that are available. And the last waterfront lot in Brickell sold for $150 million, right?
Oh
Uh,
gosh, like that's
so
you need drug kingpin money for that, right? Like, I
this
mean,
is Miami.
no, I mean, all
Well,
joking aside, right? But like, some of these things are baked into this market. So when I hear a buyer tell me something like someone told me today and say, I'm going to wait until things get better. And
hmm,
so, well, there's a couple of problems with that. Number one, what does getting better look like to you? And I can tell you whether I think that's going to happen or not. And, we did a video today. This is what I was editing before this, called "Are You Waiting for Superman?" And I think a lot of people, they are waiting for someone to come and save them or some external force like, oh, the Fed's going to slash rates. The government's going to make a bunch of new rules that are going to make houses cheaper. A lot of things, this expectation that there's some external
pipe
force that's
dream,
going to
really.
save them. And, is there an odd chance that something might come along that really helps you out? Yes, that's possible. Do you want to rely on luck as your strategy in this world financially? I don't, no financial planner would let their clients rely on luck for their retirement savings,
Right.
right? And so, I tell people every generation, like every time I have worked with people, they always look back 10 years and talk about how lucky the people 10 years ago had it, right? I think this is like a perennial sort of a thought process. And I think if you're a person out there sitting on the sidelines, you just have to break through that. You just have to kind of get that. You can't think about what someone was able to buy 10 or 20 years ago. Like, don't
Yeah.
do that to yourself unless you have a time machine I don't know about. And then we are going to be best friends if you have a time machine and have a lot of plans for it.
I think ultimately at the end of the day, there's a lot of talk out there about how you don't have to own a house to be happy. Buying a house isn't worth it. You should be able to travel, not be tied down. Sorry, they're lying to you because they're buying all the houses, right? You have to own your own home. A predictable housing expense. Housing expense is the largest expense most people have. You have to have the predictability in it. And it's not about timing the real estate market or getting lucky. It's about how long have you been in this property, right? How
It's
long
funny
have
you
you
mention that, right? Because, you know, if you had bought a home in fall of 2007, right? Like you were the unluckiest person on the planet. Your
yeah,
timing was the worst. Today, where would you be? Well, you'd be positive in the money by a bunch of equity, and your payment would be about half what it was in 2007
yeah.
because you had a chance to refinance over those 15 years or so. And so,
And
even
you
if
would have
you were the
locked in your
person who picked the
homestead.
worst time,
Yeah, you would have locked in even your homestead. Your taxes would go up less. The person that was renting then and is renting now has not only thrown all that money away, but they just never had anything to invest in because you need to make money while you sleep. Grant Cardone is out there telling everybody you don't need to buy a house. You should be renting. What they don't tell you is your money has to be invested somewhere. So for all those people that say, well, you don't need to own your own real estate. You can be able to rent. You can move here and there. The caveat is you need to have an investment, right? And most people, their largest investment is their home, right? And so you may as well own your own home. And the longer that you own your home, the less you owe, the more the property is worth, the lower your taxes are, and the more money, the equity that you have to transfer into your next home. But I learned this. I learned this the hard way because my parents, first generation American, they were immigrants. They worked really, really hard, bought a house, sold a house, bought a house, sold a house. So they always traded up, traded up, traded up. But what happened in the crash 2008, 2009, not only were my parents older, my godfather got into a car accident, the real estate market went to hell, the banks went out of business. It was really difficult to get by. So all of their hard work wiped away in a year. And so they needed to get back in the saddle. And so as soon as they could, they bought a property. And it's never too late because they, even in their late 50s, early 60s, they were able to buy that property. And today in their 70s and 80s, they don't have to worry about where am I going to live and they don't have to move in with me. And it's all about how long they've had it. But you had to have an investment. And if it wipes out for one reason or the other, you got to get back in the saddle, back on that horse. But if you don't do
well,
anything,
yeah, I mean, if you look, I tell people the housing market in a lot of ways is sort of like the merry-go-round at the park. The merry-go-round goes round and round, and the horses go up and down. The only time you are
I
really
like
in
that.
trouble is when you jump off of it. That's when people get hurt,
Yeah.
right? Right. I
Well, you
think.
can time the jump. That's the thing. When you own, you can time your sale.
Oh yeah, and if one of the things that I talk about a lot with people, I don't know if you talk about this, but I like people to have choices and options. If you develop a strategy where you're relying on a certain set of events to occur, that's kind of problematic. I like my clients to have more flexibility built into their strategy, right? I don't want them ever to be in a position where they aren't the one choosing when they sell, right? Trying to time the market to buy something is very tricky. There are people that spend a lot of money trying to figure it out and they still get it wrong 50% of the time.
And
So
unless
don't try
you
to
live
do that.
or rent free at home, there is no timing the market. You're paying somebody's mortgage.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Right. And also, one of the things I find that people make that's a really big mistake is that they feel like whatever situation they have, whether that's renting a little apartment somewhere or whatever, and they're paying, we'll say 2 grand a month, they're like, they think that situation, if they do nothing, that will just continue into the future
Nope.
indefinitely. And the reality is we live in a very changing world. So what happens is you might look and say, well, I don't like what I can buy for my budget today, so I'm just going to stay renting. And what you don't realize is 10 years from now, you may not even be able to afford the place you were renting. I
Right.
had a client, he was a teacher, and he started off in a 2 bedroom apartment that turned into a 1 bedroom plus den. Then that turned into a 1 bedroom because the rents kept going up
Oh,
faster than his salary. Finally, he ends up in a studio. The pandemic happens. He's teaching from home in a studio apartment. And that's when he cried uncle and called me and said, there's nowhere smaller to move to. I can't make the next jump. I need to do something
yeah.
here. And so, and guess what? Now it's reversed. Now that person has seen his payment has gone down because he was able to refinance, and the value of his property has gone up, and his pay has gone up. So his situation is improving rather than
Right.
deteriorating.
Right.
And he's like, I don't know why I waited so long to do this. I should have done this when the first 2 bedroom to 1 bedroom plus den thing happened. That's when right?
Now that's a question I'd like to answer. Why do you think people wait so long? Why don't people take action until their backs are forced against the wall?
Do you want the short, easy answer?
Yeah.
Because people are afraid of making decisions.
Right.
I'm
Well, then,
afraid of making like I'm not immune to this. I don't say this like from some kind of
well,
high
we're
horse. Like
human, right?
decisions are difficult because here's the thing. Whatever you're doing, you know what that is. It's not unknown. You know what that is. If you make a decision to make a change for something, you don't exactly know what's on the other side of that. That's scary. And I think if you give people the option of doing nothing, they will frequently take it. However, doing nothing isn't really an option, it's an illusion. Like I said, whatever situation you have, the world inevitably changes. And so, you know, I try to give people it's like this little hurdle, right? And if you start building up information and confidence, eventually that scariness gets low enough that they can hop over it. And so that's what I try to do is, and sometimes I tell people, I say, look, you might think that what I'm trying to do is get you to decide to buy a house. No, the reality is I'm trying to get you to make a very deliberate decision, not a by default, I'm just going to not do anything decision, but an
Well,
affirmative choice. And if you do that, I am thrilled and I feel like I have done a service to help you make a deliberate and intentional choice. And a lot of times my clients say, this is not good for us to buy at the moment. We have some job things, we have some other concerns going on. There's something our parents might need to move in with us. We're uncertain about that. But those people, even those ones, what they do is they say, okay, we do want to buy a house. As soon as we have the parent situation settled, then we are going to come back and revisit this.
right.
So they still make an affirmative plan, even if it's not today, right? Even if their decision today is that I don't want to move forward.
Well, I always say, listen, just be the author of your story, not the victim of it. Right. And so by taking action, by making a decision and actually being the one behind the course chosen, you're always going to be better off because you can always do a course correction. But when you wait until the last moment and you're just, a victim of the world moving around you,
Rising interest rates, prices being higher, like what,
right?
like take your pick of the things that you'd like to be a victim of.
Right,
There's
and
plenty to choose from,
there's
right?
plenty to choose from. So, I choose to not be a victim, and so I say find a role model, right? I'm a first generation American, so I look at my friends growing up who, had many generations and all of their family owned homes, even some that even had trust funds. And what was the main common denominator? They owned real estate. Their parents owned real estate. Their grandparents owned real estate. Occasionally you hear somebody whose grandparents were rich and then they weren't, and now they have to rebuild themselves back up. But the most American story you get is came here with nothing, built it from the ground up. But 99% of the time is through real estate. You
Oh,
know,
it's what is it? The Federal Reserve does a consumer finance survey, every 10 years. So they're getting ready to do another. It's either every 6 years or every 10 years. They're getting ready to do another one. The last one, they have a chart that compares the net worth of households where they live in a home that they own versus the net worth of households that rent the home that they own. The people who own, on average, have 30 times the net worth. Not like 20% more, not 50% more, 30 times. That is 3,000% higher, more net worth. Like, I mean, the numbers are so clear on this for people. And anybody who's even been around since before the pandemic, right? Like we've seen that demonstrated. Right. You compare the families that didn't own and the ones that did, and you can see where their net worth is and their finances and their security for the future. And I just, it's tough. I mean, I feel like us talking about this is preaching to the choir. And I'm going to say something kind of controversial. And I think some people might disagree with this, but I think the number one challenge to home ownership for people today is not interest rates. It's not lack of inventory. It's not housing shortages. The number one obstacle to home ownership is mindset. And I truly 100% believe that. And I am in a very expensive market here in Southern California, right? Like I have all the actual financial problems here that people talk about, and it's not like these challenges aren't challenges too. They are, but it's, I've got solutions to get through these or methods or things, but the mindset one, gosh, that's hard when you're your own obstacle to homeownership. It really, that's the toughest thing.
And so let's talk about mindset, because I get a lot of complaints from the younger generations, Gen Zs, people in their 20s, look, finally want to buy their own place or even get their own apartment. And they're so upset and so angry that they can't get the dream home like right out of college. And that goes to something to say about like the instant gratification that everybody is kind of looking for in today's day and age, and all these dopamine triggers that we get on the phone. It's just like more, now. If you can delay gratification, right, buy the duplex or a multifamily before you buy the condo or the single family, right? It's monopoly. Start small and grow. A wise man once said, "I like what I can get until I can get what I want." Nobody deserves anything. You got to work for it. You got to sacrifice for it. That's the American way. If you can really get yourself out of that mindset of I deserve it all and I should have it now, you get rid of that, your life will improve. Because when you are ultimately responsible for the outcome, right? You're not blaming anybody. You're taking ownership of it.
I'm going to throw a bone here to the people that might be watching this and like growling at their screen.
The two people in the back.
Right. Look, I'm going to throw a bone here. One of the biggest differences between now and let's pick 20 years ago, 30 years ago, right? One of the biggest difference between now is I think the disparity between what people want and what people can afford has changed. I don't think houses fundamentally are actually that much more expensive, but I think the houses people want. So in the mid 1980s, let's use an example, the mid 1980s, right? What did most people wanted? Honestly, they wanted a suburban tract home in the middle of nowhere. Like that was what they wanted.
With one bathroom.
Right. One was good. 1.5 was a taste of luxury. And two was living the good life. Yeah. So today though, and right, most people could afford that because those were on the fringe areas. They were far from downtown areas. That was where land was cheap. So there wasn't much of a disconnection between what young people could afford and what young people wanted. Like maybe they wanted the bigger model and couldn't quite get it, but they could generally afford to be in the area they wanted to be in.
Well, the difference I have lucky enough to have 2 cars, right? Now, life has never been better for human beings on this planet ever in recorded history.
True.
Never.
Right? But the difference now is, what do most of my younger buyers want? They want a walkable area. They want to be near where all the action is. They'd love to be in a place with a nice climate like San Diego, right? Yeah. And you start adding these things up, and guess what? That creates this terrible disconnect between expectation and affordability. And I think what they want is they want exactly what their parents had in the place that they would like to have it. And I did this analysis, like there's this meme going around. It talks about Al Bundy, Al Bundy from the TV show Married to
Yeah,
Children. He
yeah.
was a shoe salesman, right? Saying he
The
owned
stay-at-home wife.
he owned a suburban tract house, right? 2-story. And they say, Al Bundy could never afford a house like today. And I said, whoa, 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 hold up on that. I said, Al Bundy was in semi-rural Illinois. What is the average salary for a retail person who might work at a shoe store that sells like women's shoes, right? So I said, what is a Nordstrom, which is a
You
department
remember
store
the
out here,
show down to the
right?
T.
What is a Nordstrom? I know I have a wonderful memory for useless facts. What does a Nordstrom shoe salesman make on average, in America? Well, guess what? Today that person makes about $65,000 a year, maybe 70, right?
Yeah.
Guess how much 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-story houses are in Joliet, Illinois? They're in the low threes, high twos.
Perfect.
You
That's all you
can
need.
actually make those numbers work.
That's a $2,500 mortgage payment with property insurance, taxes, and everything included. And
Correct.
that is in line with
That person Al Bundy
yeah.
would qualify to buy the same
Yeah.
exact house today. And in fact, you'll notice that wasn't a remodeled house, just to take
Right.
note for some of the
Right.
millennials on there.
It was a 70s finishes. The difference is Al Bundy didn't have $1,000 car payment and a whole bunch of credit cards and an expensive, traveling bill. That's what people get into now. The amount of people who come to me and they're spending $1,500 on his car, $1,000 on her car, and they have $50,000 in credit card debt, and they're hemming and hawing about a $3,000 mortgage payment. And I'm like, guys, that's your cell phone and 2 of your cars together. That I'm sorry, you've got to reprioritize. And that's back to when I say you got to start with the starter house. You don't start at the finish line. You've got to buy the fixer-upper in the good neighborhood, the property that you can value add, the multifamily that becomes an investment property that buoys your income, to helps you qualify for the next property. This is monopoly, right? That's the American dream. It's not just you get what you want when you want it and that's it and never have to work again. That's just not true. It's just not true. That was Friends, the sitcom. They didn't work all day. They made $30,000 a year, as a waitress in the city, and lived in a 4-bedroom apartment with a deck.
Yeah. A coffee shop? I mean, what is that? They're describing Portland in the early 2000s, right? Like work at a coffee place and like have a killer apartment with your friends.
Yeah.
And look, I mean, like the world has changed, right? On the other hand, houses today are far more energy efficient. They're frankly a lot safer than they were. So it's not like we've gone backwards. Like we've gotten some things too. And what I tell people is, you will not always get everything that you want. You may not even get even close to what you believe that you deserve. But I think you have to look at your choices of I can do nothing and end up farther and farther behind financially, or I can do something. Like those are your two options. The sit and sulk in the corner about it is not an option. But I also do sympathize a little bit because I understand people that, it's very hard as human beings. We naturally want to look at what somebody else had. Like this is compare and despair.
That is our biggest flaw. That is our biggest flaw, a flaw in humanity, and I think maybe even American culture. You should applaud what other people can have and work for, and it doesn't take anything away from you. But when you're upset because you don't have enough, wrong metric.
Well, we could learn a lot from Europe in that sense. I think,
Yeah.
I think a little bit of desire and aspiration is very healthy, but it's kind of like adding salt to your food, right? A little bit makes it tastier, and a lot, basically can ruin the dish. So it's hard when I talk to people too, because, I know in our time, I think we're getting close here, but I want to know if this is happening in your market. And this is something that is so discouraging because I have clients. These are people that work their butts off. They've saved a ton of money to buy a house, right? They find a house, they can qualify, they can afford it. They don't have car payments, right? Like they've done everything right. I couldn't have asked them to do anything else. And then sure enough, they get beat out on a house because everybody is a cash offer with their parents paying,
Mm,
bringing in the cash, and they
yeah.
are ones who had to save their $500,000 by themselves, right? That
Yeah.
they amassed
Yeah.
on their own. And like, what would you tell people like that who are in that situation?
This is basically I model my life off of this, right? I would like my future generations of my lineage and my family to be the ones that have that help. And so the onus is on me to be the one to do it. Nobody owes me anything. I can always go back and say, oh, I should have had it better or I deserved it more. No, 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 no. You got to think with an immigrant mentality. I came here with nothing. I have to go out and build everything that I get. That just means I have to work a little bit harder. But this is one of the only countries where if you work harder, you get more. And that's why everybody wants to live here, And I being in the South Florida market, 85% of the people that live here were not born here, right? And up until about 3 or 4 years ago, most of us were from South America, Latin America, Europe. Now it's New Yorkers, California, Chicago, major cities that have come here. But everybody here started out with nothing, And so unfortunately, that was your station in life. And that just means work harder, be a little bit more calculated, start with the multifamily, roll that into a condo, roll that into a house. Within 10 years, you will be exactly where you want it to be. It's just not going to be there today. We got to work a little harder. So what? I say,
I mean,
you
I
know,
think that's true too. I tell people real estate is a marathon. It is not a sprint. You are
yeah,
not making decisions for where you're going to be 12 months from now. You're making decisions for your financial trajectory 20 years from now, right? Just
yeah,
like your parents who, despite losing everything, they jumped back on the horse as soon as
yeah.
they were able, right? And that paid off for them. Imagine if they had just held that as like a grudge and never done anything, which a lot of people did, during that time.
A
They
lot of
lost
people.
everything and they're like, never again.
Yeah. No, I know a lot of people that still they lost their shirt once and they decided that it's just owning real estate's just not for them. I'm sorry. It's for everybody. It is mandatory that it's for everybody, or you're going to be somebody's tenant. And listen, there may not be anything wrong with that, being a tenant at some point in your life. You got to make sure that your income is where it needs to be, your job is where it needs to be. You're not going to move away from this place for at least 5 years or so. That's when it's the right time for you. But as soon as it's the right time, you need to take action.
Oh,
Absolutely.
I mean, I agree. It's not always easy to get off that fence. And I also try to have a little bit of empathy for the people and the struggles. I mean, I know people, like I said, I have this couple right now. I mean, they have worked their butts off. They have saved. I mean, they've amassed a huge amount of savings. Like this is like something to be commended. And they're finding that maybe that road is a little bumpier than they expected
Yeah.
to get. I mean, we're going to get there, right? Like I believe it. In fact, they've texted me while we are on this. I believe that we're going to get there, but it's going to require a little bit of mental fortitude. And we all want to go back to the warm, safe cave, right?
Yeah.
That's our natural tendency. If you want to grow, that's not how it works.
It's going to
Um,
take a little bit of elbow grease, buy the ugliest house in the best neighborhood, the
and
one
some
that,
sweat,
yeah,
sweat,
sweat equity
probably
is
some
going to get
tears,
you
and
there.
maybe some blood. I bled for my
Definitely
first
blood.
house.
Definitely blood. And you know what though? When you're a homeowner, it's worth it. It's going to be more work than you thought.
Well, you're in
It's going to
control of your
take
destiny, right? Which is something that I think, that's the problem when you rent, right? Is that you're not in control of where you live. Ultimately, someone else gets to call the shots. And like, I couldn't live that way. Like, that was my biggest beef being a renter. We are about out of time, but I wanted to finish up a little bit with, if you're watching this out there and you like how we work, hopefully you do. Um, We've got
like and
contact
subscribe
info
below.
below. Um, I am in the Southern California area here. Milton is in the Miami, South Florida
South Florida market.
market. And if you're somewhere other than that, we both know a lot of great agents who think like us and are really at the top of their game. And frankly, I believe every person deserves a professional in the real estate space. I truly believe that every client deserves a professional. We know a lot of those professionals, so definitely don't hesitate to reach out. And I think we're going to see you again for the next one, right?
That's right. Every two
Do we need
weeks.
like a log off call sign? I think I don't. We'll think of something funny, probably by the fourth one.
Right. Till then, goodbye.
Till then, yeah. Till then, we'll see you next time.
Take care.
Take care.